Welcome to the Leadership Happens podcast. We're happy to have you all here today. And this is a podcast where we engage leaders from all industries and backgrounds and experiences to have a very open and honest and very candid conversation about what it takes to be a true and effective leader in today's marketplace. We hope that you, our audience of HR executives and CEOs and business leaders, take away a nugget of wisdom from every episode where you can apply that to your business and to your team right away and help you be a more effective leader as well. Today, I'm joined by Jake Kurtz out of Florida. He is the CEO and founder of Brick Media and also one of the leaders of the 4-day workweek philosophy. So thank you, Jake. Thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me, Ken. Been looking forward to this for a while.
That makes two of us since we first connected. It's been a great conversation on my mind. Looking forward to kind of delving into where you're at right now. And also congratulations, as we were talking offline, today is your 5-year anniversary as a business, which is a huge milestone. So congrats.
Thank you. Yeah, as you can see behind me, I walked into my office today in downtown Tampa, and there's balloons and confetti everywhere. And there's a big number 5 that the whole team was signing, and there's little hats. So everybody made a big deal out of the fact that it's our 5-year anniversary. And I never really, in the early days, saw myself as an entrepreneur or even knew that I was going to have a successful business. I was kind of just going with the flow of what felt right to me. And the fact that we're sitting here 5 years later with a real business with, 15 full-time employees and 50, 60 clients, it's surreal, but just very grateful for the opportunity. But looking forward to diving more into everything that you just talked about.
No, that's fantastic. No, and I agree. I remember that same thing at the 5-year anniversary. And I remember even at the 1 year also thinking, wow, who would have thought 1 year ago I'd be where we are today, right? And I'm sure I'm curious about how it is for you, but for me, like one of the biggest lessons learned is that I really thought I would have figured out how to quote unquote run the business. I would have the formula figured out by year 3, certainly by year 5. And one thing I've learned over now 16 years is that just when you think you figured things out, things change. Either there's something on the macro scale or customers come and go or your team members change, whatever it might be. And I realized that the one thing that's predictable as a business owner is that things are unpredictable and you have to be willing to kind of, ebb and flow as they come and go.
It's really interesting how Brick Media, obviously at the very beginning, I was doing all the social media. I was doing all the client relationship management. I was building websites. I pretty much started off the business as a glorified freelancer because it was just me at the beginning. And I knew how to do a little bit of everything under the digital marketing realm. So I was just kind of taking on clients by myself. And of course, at the beginning, I was doing all of it. And then once I started adding, freelance help, part-time help at the beginning, I was able to get social media content creation off my plate for the most part. And then, a couple years later, I was able to get client relationship management off my plate. And then, of course, now that I have a full staff of 15 people that are full-time, some of them are content creation, some of them are social media management, some of them are account managers that manage the relationships day to day. I've delegated, probably 80% of the day-to-day work that Brick Media does as a social media agency. But it's really interesting how even when you delegate so much, there's always something else that you need to figure out how to delegate next. And I was just in a little mastermind business leaders church group this morning that I go to every Wednesday. And it's all business owners in that group that are pretty much in a similar phase. Some of them are a little bit further along. Some of them are a little bit earlier. But overall theme today was the fact that anytime you think you have it figured out, there ends up being other things that you need to figure out too. And it's sort of a never ending journey that leaders can all probably relate to if they're listening to this. It's like now for me, I still think there's days where I am doing quote unquote dumb things that I shouldn't really be doing. Like even when I have things quote unquote figured out and I have a lot of things delegated, there's still days where an entire 8-hour, 9-hour, 10-hour period goes by where I'm like, why was I doing that all day? That should be delegated. Somebody else on my team should be doing that. One of the big challenges now in our business is whenever we're getting slammed with potential client inquiries and there's a lot of interest around our business, one of my big focuses right now is staffing. So one of the main things that I haven't delegated yet is the whole hiring of people and who is working on what social media presence and who is staffed on what client, who on the team is managing who, what two people work really well together, what two people don't really work well together, what combination of people is right for this client given their goals, all those types of things. And they're very strategic things, but they're also things that there's people in my group that are maybe a little bit further along than I am right now, and they're like, that's also stuff that you should delegate. And
Sure,
it's funny
sure.
that
Yeah.
and it's funny that I viewed that as something that, okay, well, I got content creation and client relationships off my plate, so like this is what I should be doing now. But then when you talk to somebody that's even further along, they're like, well, actually that's also something that you should figure out how to get off your plate too.
Right.
So
And you can only offload so many things, right? I mean, you got to, and I think that balancing act that you're talking about is knowing what to offload and making sure that you have somebody on the team you can offload it to, but also not offloading everything that's strategic or even everything that's tactical, because you want to stay in front of your customers and you want to have that frontline exposure to what's going on out there as well, and not just hear it from your lieutenants or your colonels, so to speak. So it's that fine line, kind of that balancing act between staying engaged enough, but not staying so overly engaged that you're just too involved in the minutia that really should be delegated to somebody else. There's no formula that I've found out there. Even after 16 years of running my business, I still have not found a clear formula about how to know what to do.
well, and the beautiful thing about business is that all of us are different, and anybody that's in a leadership position where they straight up own the company. I mean, I know it's a little bit different if you're an executive somewhere or if you have investors that you have to answer to and that sort of thing. But if you are the owner of a private business where you're the sole owner and you get to make all the decisions, everybody's different. And that's very liberating, because some business owners probably want to just maybe have a 5-person business where they're still very involved in the day to day, and that's just what they like. And I think that's also something that I try to keep in mind when I'm in these groups and I'm talking to other leaders about how they run things. It always needs to run through an additional filter for me of, well, what do I want? Like, what do I want to do? What do I like? Just because somebody else is telling me that I should delegate this thing, does that actually mean that I should delegate it? Because maybe I like that thing and maybe that's something that I'm really good at and enjoy.
Exactly,
So
exactly.
I think that's the main thing that all leaders need to keep in mind, is that of course there's good advice out there, but you always need to stay true to yourself. And that's the beauty of entrepreneurship, is we're in control of our own destiny, and
Right,
we can't
right.
lose sight of that as we go.
Yeah, I would say when I'm having a bad day, I always kind of joke by saying, "Well, it's self-inflicted, right? I brought this upon myself because I chose to run a business." But then when you have a good day, it's also self-inflicted, and you think, "Great, I have that control. I chose to do this as a business owner and go into business for myself and and run a team, hire a team." There's a lot of solopreneurs out there that, to your point, they know they're not great at and they don't really have a passion for managing people, and they're better off doing execution and all the strategy all by themselves. That's not for me. My team is about half the size of yours. There's 7 of us, and then there's about 15 or so that you have on your team. And my firm is kind of in a bit of a different or unusual structure for an executive search firm, because I love the business development side. Right. I enjoy recruiting as well, that the tactical part, but what I really have a passion for is business development. So rather than me doing the recruiting and hiring a BD person, it's the other way around. I have 2
Right.
really strong search consultants that are on delivery. I do the business development and I run the operations and the strategic side. But to your point, it took me a while to figure out what my passion is and what I'm best at, and then to start to build my team around my own strengths, and then bring on folks that they could leverage their own strengths as well.
Makes sense. Yeah, I'm 32 years old and I'm still in a season of life where, I don't have any kids yet. I've only been doing this business thing for 5 years. I'm very aware that the way that I feel at 40 is going to be different than the way I feel at 32. The way that I feel at 50 is going to be different than the way I feel at 40. You know, all of it's always going to be changing over time. But all that I can do is be true to who I am and how I'm feeling and what I'm wanting at any given point in my life. And I just think it's very liberating when you're a business owner that you can take full accountability for the good things. You can take full accountability for the bad things. And the slippery slope is when you start to blame other people for things that you ultimately, as a business owner, are in control of the whole thing. So even if some account manager on my team is, not being timely with the client and they're taking 2 weeks to respond to something, a business owner could say that's the account manager's fault, but a good leader will say, no, that's my fault. Like, I put that person in place and I never coached them to, get back to the client in a certain amount of time.
Right, right.
Taking on that full accountability and just knowing that you're fully in control of the good and the bad is just such a powerful thing. But
Yeah,
um,
I think the two best things in my experience that you can be as a leader is somebody who empowers your team, but also somebody who holds that same team accountable. If you
right.
have only one and not both, then you're in trouble. If you only hold them accountable, but you're micromanaging them and you're on top of them every minute of the day, they are not going to be very engaged, not going to stay with you very long, and they're also not going to learn or grow in their career. And on the flip side, right, if instead of being, only focused on accountability, if you're only empowering, but you're letting things slide and deadlines come and go, and people around them think, oh, you don't really have these deadlines are kind of soft, right? Jake's not going to
Right.
really hold us to this, and it's just about empowerment. Then you have people running all over you, and nothing gets done, and things slip in the cracks, and then you've got clients that are unhappy as well. So you've got to have both of those things to really make it work.
And do you feel that you personally, I know like you're interviewing me, but I'm just curious, interviewing you
Sure,
now,
sure.
do you gravitate towards one or the other in terms of accountability and empowerment?
Yeah, I think a very good question. I think if I'm being fully self-aware, I am better at empowerment than I am at accountability. I think
I'm the same.
I'm more uncomfortable holding folks accountable. And I think part of that honestly is that I think I'm a really good CEO and leader of a small team. And my team, we're all like family, which is a blessing and a curse. Maybe yours is very similar because then you feel like, okay, this person is a part of my business first, but they're also a human, right? And that's a really important part of what makes our team work so well and thrive together. And so at times I have a hard time holding them accountable and pushing back and saying, hey, you kind of screwed up here, but let's talk about how you can avoid that going forward. So it's a great question. And I'd throw it back to you. How do you feel?
Yeah, I would say I definitely gravitate towards empowering people, not micromanaging people, hiring and fully trusting when I hire somebody to do a certain job. I'm very much somebody that's I would consider good at delegation. I'm definitely not one of those people that holds on to tasks and has to do it myself and my way or the highway. I would do it this way. Like I trust that everybody has their own little nuances in the way that they're going to communicate, make content. Of course, there needs to be standards that the brand lives by and that we need to live up to, because that's just me setting the vision and the standard for the company. But I trust everybody to do it sort of their way. There's quarterbacks in the NFL like Tom Brady. There's quarterbacks in the NFL like Patrick Mahomes. Like, they're both good at what they do, but they do it slightly differently. So
Sure.
I view business the same way, where it's like you're just going to have slight nuances depending on the person. But if you're good, then you're good. But
I agree. Yeah. Well, and
I also
I
have a
wanted,
very
please go ahead. Sorry.
oh, you're good. But I was going to say I definitely have a hard time giving constructive criticism and feedback when I love the person as a human, and it's a very difficult thing, especially when you have that family dynamic with a small business, because when you only have 10 or 15 people and one person gets negative feedback or one person gets let go, everybody feels it. It's not like you're in some huge building with 300 people and you don't even realize when someone's not there anymore or when they have a bad day. Everybody feels it when you're in a small business, so you even have to be a little bit more sensitive to it. But for me, I think the key has been giving feedback along the way so that it's not some big shock 6 or 12 months in where it almost feels like resentment has been building the whole time and like you really haven't been doing a good job and I'm just unloading on you all at once. I think if you give small regular feedback, and you have to be very honest about it, but do it in a compassionate, empathetic way. Um, a lot of the time it's really just how you deliver the message and how you go about it. But I think as long as you're giving regular feedback along the way, somebody's going to know where they stand with you. And it's probably not even going to get to that point where it feels uncomfortable.
Yeah, it
So
shouldn't be a
that's usually how
surprise.
I combat that. Yeah.
No, I agree completely. And I mean, for most companies, at least of our size, right? The days of the once a year annual sit down for a performance review, those days are gone. Luckily, it's still around in a lot of the big, more siloed companies, but the in the recruiting world, it's more of what we call a career conversation. To your point, right? It's ongoing. It may not be a 2 hour meeting, every single month, but it's at least a 15-minute check-in every month. Hey, how are things going? Has anything changed in your life? Have any alterations or adjustments to your long-term career path or whatever might be going on, right? And to your point, and you use that as an opportunity to ask them, first of all, how they think they're doing and what you as a leader, as their leader, can do better. But then also you can give them feedback so that if something does go wrong, it's not an all of a sudden, oh great, here comes Jake again, here comes Ken, they're going to just come down hard on me right now. I only ever see them when things are going bad, right? It's that ongoing dialogue that really empowers them truly.
Yeah, I think one of the hardest parts about leadership and running a company in general is the balance of those two extremes where you're running a business, but at the same time you need to be building a culture and a family. And um, back to using a sports reference again, those teams that have the same coaches and the same players and the same sort of energy going on for a while, those always end up being the strong organizations that they might not win the Super Bowl every year, but they're always going to be in the conversation. They're always going to be at least decent. I'm a Steelers fan, so it's a little bit, it's one of those things where the Steelers have always been like that. So it's very easy for me to point to that reference. But that's how I feel like business is too. It's like you want to have a team, you want to have a family, you want to have an organization where the same people stick around for years at a time, because training people is hard. Getting people to follow your vision as a leader is hard. And a lot of it is just kind of osmosis of like being around the leader, knowing what they care about, knowing the vision. And I think that's what's making Brick Media so special in this phase of business that we're in, is the same people have been around for a while. And it's getting to the point where, for example, the account managers, when they're talking to clients, they're saying things and thinking about things in the way that I would think about it without me even having to train them in that way, because they've just been around me so much and they hear me so much. So that's a real thing in business. And I think that if you can balance that with accountability, then that's like the perfect mix. But it's always a fine line where like you're either a little bit too business and accountability all the time, but then you can also get a little bit too culture, family, and it gets a little bit delusional. So you have to remember that you're running a business, but you also have to, be finding that fine line of making sure that it feels good at the same time, but not lose sight of what you're actually doing. So it's a fine line all the time.
It is, and remembering that your people are humans first, right? And they're also business people, part of the business. But you've got to, again, that fine line that you mentioned, having to kind of toggle back and forth and keep the business in mind, but also not ignoring the humanity of the people that are making your business run. Yeah, I agree completely. And once again, I just want to thank you for being here. I'm here today with Jake Kurtz. He's the CEO and founder of Brick Media out of Tampa, Florida. And I want to get into also the piece that we're talking about earlier. I mentioned about the 4-day work week, and I'm curious about how that's working for you. I know you were born in California, but you grew up in Pennsylvania, and now you're in Florida. And I literally just saw yesterday that one of the congressional folks in Pennsylvania just proposed a bill. Maybe you saw this, to mandate a 4-day work week in Pennsylvania for any companies with more than 500 employees, which, who knows if it's going to pass or not. But that's just fascinating to hear that's even a proposal out there.
Yeah, I mean, regardless of the politics and the bills and the policies and all the studies that are out there, I'm just glad that the conversation is being had about balance, whether it ends up being a 4-day work week, a 5-day work week, a 3-day work week, whether it's optional, whether it's mandated. Like, to me, the details of it aren't as important as the fact that it's being talked about in general. So yeah,
Great
we
point.
started.
Is your, can you give us a feel for your, because there are different definitions of a 4-day work week. In some situations like this proposed bill, it would actually, make a quote unquote work week 32 hours. So they want to keep the pay, everybody's pay the same, but have them work 8 hours less per week. Then there are other folks who define it as still being 40 hours a week, but now it's it's 4 10-hour days. How do you manage it for Brick Media?
Yeah, so the way that we do it is there's not really an official you need to work 8 hours or you need to work 10 hours. It's more of just we just work Monday through Thursday and we get the job done that we need to get done. It's funny when people approach me about this and like ask me very detailed questions about the 4-day work week, because I guess if you're technical about it, our business hours on Monday through Thursday are 8 to 6, if you're really technical about it. But so I guess that would be a 10-hour workday if you're looking at it that way. But there hasn't been one single week in the entire year that we've been doing the 4-day work week where I've approached a single person and asked them if they worked 32, 36, 40, 44. Like I don't
You're
even
not
know.
back to that point of accountability, but not micromanaging. You're not
Right.
looking at that from a minutia perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I know that there's value to knowing that whenever whenever you get to a certain scale and everything like that. But as a business, we're in the business of making our clients happy and impacting their businesses through social media. And my job internally is to make sure that the team is in a good place mentally, physically, career wise, and like their needs are being met as people and as employees of Brick Media. So I view it as if I can make the employees feel like they're in a good spot, they're safe, their company cares about them, they're happy to work here, the clients are going to inevitably feel the natural results of just having a happy, fulfilled person to work with. So that's always been my mentality is even though I'm in an industry that's very much always like clients first, care about the client, make your team work on Friday at 6 p.m. to get a campaign done and like work on the weekend if you need to and work 60 hours a week and get paid the same thing.
Right.
The creative industry just sometimes I feel like has it backwards where I don't think people realize that if you just take care of your team, your clients are going to feel the results of a happy team. So I have a team first approach versus a client first approach. But by doing that, I kind of am putting my clients first in a indirect way because I'm making sure that they're getting good people working on their accounts. Uh, Marketing agencies in general are in the business of basically selling people's time and energy and creativity. So um, I feel like if I treat the team well, the client's going to be paying for the results that they're going to want. So um, that's always been sort of my mentality. But no, I don't count the specific hours that we work. If you're being technical, it's still a 40-hour week within a 4-day period. But
Sure. Sure.
I know that there's people on my team that work 8-hour days. I know that there's people that work 10-hour days. It's more just about getting the work done. And honestly, some people would rather work a 10-hour day and like feel like they're being super productive and like they don't have to, you know, keep something on their to-do list and carry it into the next week. Like some people would just rather get all that stuff done. And um, one of the
And if you
interesting
have
pieces of
momentum, also
feedback.
you kind of keep going with that. If you have the momentum in whatever task you're doing, then you're like, oh, okay, it's 5 o'clock, I should be done. But if I can work another hour or so, that I can keep that going. I'm in that zone, in that flow. It's nice that you give them that freedom, that flexibility to do what they need to do to be most productive.
Yeah, I mean a 5-day work week versus a 4-day work week. It's just there's one with a 5-day work week, there's one more day where you need to break up that flow of I'm productive and now I'm gonna go live my life, wake up again, and then like have to get back into the groove again. Versus if you just do it 4 times, but do it a little bit more, or maybe you don't even have to do it more because you're being more efficient in those 4 days. Um, that's one less time that you have to get back into the groove. So
Sure, sure, yeah,
I think as
exactly.
as creatives, you need time for your brain to just be empty and sitting there and enjoying your life, going outside, focusing on things that aren't creativity because you only have a certain amount of it. So um, I've found that people on the team have given me feedback on Mondays, like I'm actually ready to be at work right now, or you know, Sunday night, like our team will be texting or in Slack, like, ready to see you guys tomorrow, excited for the week. And it just seems like everybody's so much more ready for the week to start because they feel like they've actually had a real weekend and some real time off to spend with family and do whatever they want. So it's been really interesting to see how it's been beneficial instead of initially maybe being a little bit skeptical if it was going to work or not.
Right, right. That's great. And I love that you've allowed it to kind of unfold a bit organically, right? And I know you obviously made a strategic and deliberate decision to do this, but I mean, if I, unless I'm mistaken, please, correct me, but your goal wasn't to go out there and say, I'm going to be the spokesperson for the 4-day work week, and that's going to be part of my leadership. And, this is what I'm going to do now as a leader. It wasn't that at all, right? It was born out of a different goal or different, desire on your part to run your business efficiently, but now you kind of have become that somewhat de facto, spokesperson, at least around Florida, with all the shows that you've been interviewed for and the different media, public publicity you've gotten. How has that been for you? So have you had to now kind of backpedal and explain yourself in a way that you didn't really think you would have to? You were kind of doing it in your own little microcosm business, and now it's kind of blown up where it's much more of a bigger scale. How have you navigated that?
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, I still sometimes get a little bit uncomfortable when people ask me detailed questions about it, because I'm like, I was just doing what felt right to me, and it just kind of ended up being a trend. Some people from the outside looking in, and like obviously not knowing me as a person, might think, okay, he saw that the 4-day work week was a trend and it was being talked about in Europe and there's studies on it, and it was a good way for him to jump on a wave of something and maybe get some publicity for it and get public relations involved and get interviewed. I legitimately did not know the 4-day work week was even being talked about. I very much just like stay in my lane and lock in and focus on what I'm doing in front of me. So all I knew was I felt like I was burning out in my own business. And in my mind, kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier, I was like, I'm in control of my own destiny here. Like I have the ability to make decisions that holistically benefit my life and not just my business or my finances and my career path. So I filled out this little diagram that was like, it's called the Wheel of Life. I think you can Google it. And it sort of breaks your life into a pie chart where it talks about faith and fun and finances and relationships and all kinds of different categories that like most people generally care about. And I realized that finance and business and career, whatever it was called on there, those two things were, almost at the full capacity of like 10 out of 10. And almost everything else was either average or below average. And that's when it really hit me like, man, I need to rebalance this wheel in some way. And one thing that you can control in your life is the time that you spend doing on certain things. So I was like, well, if I start just like working a little bit less during the week, maybe that'll be a good way for me to rebalance this wheel, because I care more about my life than my business. Like I don't love, it sounds interesting, but I don't love social media. I don't love content creation. I don't love Instagram, LinkedIn. Like I love impacting people, helping people. Um, I just love self-improvement, being the best version of myself. I'm of course passionate about my day-to-day work whenever I'm in it. And, I'm good at it because I've been in the industry so long. And it's just always been something that I've been interested in, sort of like I'd be interested in the Steelers or something. But it's always been an interest, but I can't sit there and say that I love marketing and social and digital and all these things. So I've just always been more of the type of person that views my business as a way for me to have a vehicle to do good in the world and help people. So I always just want to keep my business as an element of my life, but not something that's going to completely take over my entire life. So, I definitely don't view myself as somebody that's going to work 16 hours a day and try to build some like 50 to $100 million company just for the sake of building it, or just for the sake of saying that I have a big business. And I don't really want to be up on stages speaking and, being a guru and having a huge audience and being super known. If it happens, cool. But it's also one of those things that like, I'm not striving for fame or yachts or cars or Rolex watches or anything like that. So, um, I
That's
try to
great.
keep business in perspective. So it was actually really easy for me to, as a first step, and this was in kind of mid 2022, it was an easy first step for me to at least say, okay, I'm going to start taking half days on Fridays and like trying to be done by noon or 1. And that was kind of what I did for a couple months. And it was nice because I got a head start on my weekend. And, my wife and I don't love huge crowds. So we were able to go to dinner at like 4:35 before it gets crowded. And, it made the start to the weekend a little bit more easy and sort of a gentle ease into the weekend. And, once I filled out this wheel of life thing, I was like, well, this whole like half day Friday thing has been working for me for a bit. What if it was the whole day on Friday and like I didn't even have to work at all? Because I was realizing that those few hours that I was putting in on Fridays was kind of just to check the box of saying that I worked that day. And then I just started thinking, like, why is it that 5 days is the norm? And like, I'm a business owner, I can kind of make the decisions I want to make. And I just kind of played with the idea, thought about it for a little bit. Once I felt like it was a very viable test that was worth at least exploring a little bit, I put it into our team Slack channel and was like, what would you guys think if I was like, hey, it's a super weird rogue idea for our industry, but like, what would you think if we only worked Monday through Thursday? And of course, everybody was like, I'm down. Let's try it. I wasn't really met with any hesitation. So, but I also fully didn't want to dive in and be like, well, I'm just going to assume this is going to work and we're just going to roll with it out the gate. So I said, and this was about November, December of 2022. I said, all right, starting January 1st until March 31st of next year, we're just going to test Q1, just do Monday through Thursday for all of Q1. And we started off the year like that. I let all of our clients know in December that, hey guys, we're testing this 4-day work week thing. And we're going to make sure we're going to test it first and not fully implement it. We're going to make sure it doesn't impact any of our relationships with you guys. We care about our clients. We want to make sure that we deliver amazing work for you. We don't want the customer service to suffer. So we're just going to test it for now. And surprisingly, I wasn't met with a single, client being worried about it, client being upset about it. No clients fired us because of it. I was only met with curiosity and optimism. It seemed like clients were just like, let me know how that goes. Like, I'm interested if that works for you guys. And
that's great. Well, you had the trust and you had the credibility already in place with those clients, so they know that you're not gonna be skirting your responsibilities or not
they
following
knew.
through on the contracts or the agreements that you had with them. Yeah, they trusted you.
Yeah, they knew we'd figure it out, whether it was 4 days or 5 days. And they knew we weren't going to leave them hanging if, they needed something on a Friday and like that was the only day they could do it. They knew we weren't going to leave them hanging. So we have good trust built with our clients at this point. But
That's great. Yeah, I love that. Well, and there's a couple things that come to mind for me. I mean, first of all, that wheel of life sounds like it was almost transformational for you, or at least helped you kind of codify, and track, how are you feeling about the other areas or all the areas of your life, not just business, but personal, spiritual, whatever it might be. That's great. So that's a great takeaway. But the two things that come to mind for me are the fact that you have that self-awareness and you knew your values, you knew what was important to you. And the wheel of life, as you mentioned, helped to kind of, clarify that and crystallize that message in your own mind. So you had that awareness and you had that knowledge, but then you also were still, as an entrepreneur, still willing to take a chance. You could have very easily said, yeah, the wheel of life said this, and I'm not all happy over here, but the idea of changing up your work week potentially could never have even crossed your mind if you had stuck with status quo. If you had said, this is traditionally how you do it, you're running your own business, you're not allowed to work less than 40 hours a week. Certainly some companies work 50 or 60 hours a week, right? So who am I to try to go against that? But you took a chance and you talked to your team, again, back to that empowerment and trust of your team, which is fantastic, and got that feedback and said, let's give it a try. We're not going to change our entire structure around and throw everything out the window. Let's just see how it goes and take a chance. And I think, honestly, that is one of the core tenets of any entrepreneur. You're taking a chance. You're confident enough in what you're going to be doing, launching a business, building a team, whatever it is, changing up your work week, to know that it's probably going to be okay, but it may not, right? And if it's not okay, then you switch back and try something else. So kudos to you for taking that chance. And that's one of the great, I think for me also, lessons of being a leader and an entrepreneur is it's okay to take chances and go against the status quo.
Yeah, it's interesting how sometimes business owners, without even realizing it, will start businesses, but then they'll turn into what they were doing before. Everybody just kind of, starts to blend in with the rest of the corporate world, and they kind of forget that they're in control of their own destiny and they can do interesting things. And And I also think that people, I mean, let's just call it how it is. Like, people chase money. They don't think about life in general. I mean, I can't generalize because some people are very thoughtful about these things, but there are a lot of business owners that I talk to that I can tell from the first 5 minutes of talking to them that they're not even thinking about what they care about in life. They're just thinking about how to get more revenue, how to get more clients, how to build their team, how to hit a certain number. And I think if people take a step back and look at their own values and actually think about those values, and there's things like coaching, there's things like therapy, there's things like church and faith and whatever you're into. But for me, faith has been a big part of it because I've always been very plugged in with my faith, and I'm a Christian, and I've always been plugged in with like my church group, and um, really just thinking more deeply about myself as a person and the impact that I want to leave. And
I love that.
I just know that I'm not going to be able to do that just through business.
Yeah.
And if I do try to make it all about business, then my fitness is going to suffer, my faith is going to suffer, my relationship's going to suffer. And not that any of those things were like falling apart whenever I was working a 5-day work week and working a lot, but they definitely weren't where they could have been.
Sure.
And
Sure.
I'm only on this earth for a limited amount of time. And I'm
You
like, I
know,
don't
so
want
many
to
hours
just
in the
be,
day. Right.
yeah, I'm like, I don't want to be sitting here my entire life just thinking about business. And then, you know, I'd rather have a $1 million business and have 400 people show up to my funeral and say that I was a great dude instead of having a $100 million business and having 9 people show up to my funeral. So
Exactly right. I love that. That's
yeah.
perfect. It's very, very well put. Well, and I think, I mean, for me, I'll kind of jokingly, I'm married to a marriage and family therapist, and we talk about this all the time where, the clients that she works with and the issues that she deals with, granted, it's on the personal side, but to your point, a lot of it is still having to do with work-life balance and spending too much time in one area or this area. And that balance is certainly not easy to maintain. There's no easy formula. You have to have that self-awareness to really understand that. It's huge. But also, you mentioned a few moments ago that there's different ways to kind of get that. And I think as one of the things as a leader, one of the challenges that I've always found is that it's very lonely as the CEO or owner or leader of a company, right? At the end of the day, you might have, great executive team, but at the end of the day, you are the one that's ultimately making the final decisions, and you have to shoulder the burden of whatever decision you make, even with the input of your team. So for me, over the years, one of the things I wish I had done earlier on, which I do now, but I didn't initially, was to kind of build my own kind of peer group, right, network group. And I have an executive coach. I obviously have my wife who's a therapist, which is certainly helpful. But also then I have what I call my recruiter club. And so it's myself, and I started this about 4 or 5 years ago. And, it's myself and 6 other owners of other executive search recruiting firms. And we meet on a quarterly basis. We talk on a regular basis, but we get together in person on a quarterly basis and really kind of just share stories, what's happening as far as trends go. What are you up against? How is your team doing? What's happening with market, rates and those kinds of things and clients. And it's just a great way to normalize what you're going through, but also have that team that you can confide in and that you expect them to hold you accountable and call you out on your crap, as you know.
Mm-hmm.
Those kind of things for me have been great. So whether it's a formal group like Vistage or like Ref or whatever it might be, or Chief, or something more informal, or it's your church, all those things come together to really help, at least for me, help me become a better leader and a better business owner in the long run.
Yeah, it's interesting when I look at my budget spreadsheet that I have, and I look at my personal life expenses, and I look at my business expenses, and I realize how many things are just like coaching and getting outside feedback and therapy. And I have a business consultant group that I meet with every 2 weeks and just talk about high level brick media things. I do therapy every single week. I do my church group that's all business leaders. It's like a business leader church group that's like anywhere from 10 to 20 of us, depending on the week. That, we all own businesses and we all kind of share the same faith-based values as well. And then my wife runs her own business, so her and I are always talking about ideas. I had a networking group last year that was all business owners that met for coffee in the mornings. I have a bunch of mentors in the Tampa Bay area that I get together with every once in a while. And, some of these are just relationships and friendships. And then some of them are actually things I pay for and go out of my way to to seek out. But it's
Sure, sure.
crazy how much that stuff helps. I mean, some people I think view that stuff as a nice to have, or maybe it's like fluff. And you know, actually thinking about it now, even that wheel of life diagram that ended up turning into me doing the 4-day work week was because I hired a personal development coach that showed me the wheel of life diagram and got me thinking in this way. And then that ended up leading to a big breakthrough in my business. So all of these good things that have been happening to me, and you know, a lot of the momentum that we've seen with the business has been from me intentionally seeking ways to become more self-aware. And a lot of the time that comes through meeting with other people and people asking you the right questions, you asking other people questions about you, and like actually trying to get the truth out of them about like what you're good at, what you're not good at, which can be hard. If people love you, they always want to like make you feel good. But if you make people feel safe to tell you the actual truth about what you're good at and where you could use improvement, then that'll give you some really good insights. But I think business owners get in their own minds a lot, and it is very lonely. But going out of your way to get trusted voices and build networks and be around the right types of people that align with your values, that'll really go a long way.
I agree. I agree completely. And I think, you know, thank you. Kudos to you for being willing to be vulnerable as well and have that conversation. And you'd be surprised that, and you probably see this as well, how often I talk to other leaders and CEOs, and you just know something is a little bit off, that it's been a rough time, or you know their industry is suffering or whatever it might be. And you're trying to give them a chance to kind of confide in you or just say, hey, things are just really shitty right now, right? Can you help me or whatever? And they just don't take that opportunity to be vulnerable. Right. And I think, you know, your style is very similar to my style. I'm an open book. I'm vulnerable. And you don't want to just, you know, wear your emotions on your sleeve, because you are the leader and people look to you to set that tone. You got to be careful. But at the
Mhm.
same time, if I pretended that I wasn't human, or that I wasn't having a rough day once in a while, or I needed to get away for whatever amount of time, you know, just to get a refresh, right, and kind of reset my own mind. If I pretended that never happened, you know, I'd be lying to myself and to my team. And then also, it doesn't allow them to feel comfortable enough to come to me when they're having those same feelings, right? So that vulnerability as a leader, I think, is A, is underrated, and B, maybe it's because the, you know, men in the world in general are taught, you know, from a very early age to not show your emotions, which I think is a horrible way to run a business, especially. But if we can normalize it and help talk about it and say, hey, look, it's not only is it okay, you need to be vulnerable, you need to express what's going on, and it's only going to make you a better leader, and it's going to make your team more effective because they want to be part of that kind of a culture.
Right. And it is just taught, you know, you view feelings as sort of a weakness instead of as a strength. And luckily the world is starting to have more productive, thoughtful conversations around these topics. And I think the world collectively, America especially, we're getting in our feelings a little bit more. You know, like therapy used to be like, don't even tell people you go to therapy. And now I'm sitting here on a podcast like telling everybody that I go to therapy every week. And
Right.
you know, I go to my church group and it's like a bunch of guys, all ages, all backgrounds, just talking about their feelings and talking about their faith and how it intersects with their businesses and challenges they're going through. People that are dealing with situations in their relationships and how that's impacting their lives, not just their businesses. And yeah, I think it's just kind of a stigma that just needs to go away.
I
You know,
agree. I
it's as
agree.
simple as that.
Definitely.
It just needs to
Yeah.
go away.
Well, and
But
to that point, you know, I want to chat for a few minutes about, you know, your team, right, and comparing that dynamic to the clients that you work with. I mean, and to your point from a few minutes ago, mental health is a great example. So at least looking at your website, it looks like a lot of your team is similar in age, so millennials or Gen Zers, right? But I would imagine that a lot of your clients, the buyers, the folks that you're working with, the CMOs and CEOs that represent your clients, they're probably a bit older. Maybe they're more like me. They're Gen Xers in their 50s and maybe even older. How do you and or do you have to adjust in terms of how vulnerable and how open and how you manage your team internally versus how you and your team manages your client base as those account directors?
that's a good question. It's interesting. I try to set the culture internally with certain values. And like I was saying earlier, I just want the sort of the osmosis of being around me and knowing what I'm trying to build here to seep into everybody on the team. And then we're all sort of marching to the same song. Um, when it comes to clients, of course, we have to sometimes adjust the way that we approach certain conversations just based on what we know about the people. I think it's just being empathetic. Um, and that's actually one of the values that I'm always trying um, to teach our team about is just being empathetic. Always remembering that maybe if a client, talks to you a certain way one week and then the next week they talk to you a different way, maybe they just had a really rough morning, or like maybe they just got in a fight at home, or maybe their business is struggling this month compared to last month. Um, you never know what other people are going through. So I think it's less of a generational thing. And I think it's just more of a empathy thing. Just remembering that sometimes you have to read the room and remember that just because somebody's in a bad mood or in a good mood, there's always outside factors that play into everything. And yeah, of course there's little things where we're in social media, so I think sometimes clients expect that we're going to be a little bit younger, a little bit more on top of the trends, which sometimes is why they hire us in the first place, because they trust that we're on the pulse of all those types of things. But we have some clients that are more digitally and social media savvy than others, and whenever we approach those conversations and those relationships, we just have to sort of read the room and adjust accordingly. I mean, there's some clients where we kind of have to speak in like ABCs and 1, 2, 3s about social and digital. There's others where we can kind of talk to them the way that we would talk to each other. So, I don't know. I mean, I think there's definitely nuances between Gen X, millennials, Gen Z, all that type of stuff. But I try not to let any of that factor into the way that we run our business or our relationships. I just view us all as people that are trying to be empathetic and help each other. And I think at the end of the day, that's what all of us have in common, is that we're all just people trying to do our best. Um, so I think that's the way that I try to look at business as a whole.
That's great. No, I think that's a great approach to take. Let me ask you a question about, and this is maybe a little bit towards what I just mentioned, but also a little bit different. So being on the cutting edge of social media and working with influencers and what's happening with obviously with AI and Chat GPT. I know you and I follow each other on Instagram, and I know that you have a current billboard campaign going on, right? Which is
Mhm.
very old school. I mean, when
Right.
I saw that, I was like, oh, that's super cool, right? And I assume it's probably in Tampa, near where the business is. But I'm curious
Mhm.
about again, kind of your willingness to take a chance and go kind of old school. And then B, have you had clients ask you, hey Jake, what about this idea? Should we think about a direct mail campaign? Should we think about billboards, something that is kind of the antithesis of social media, if you will?
Yeah, so there's two things to answer that question. One of them is more high level, one of them is more tactical and practical. So the high level thing is just that mindset that I was talking about earlier of just like try something different and don't be so afraid to just like try something out. You know what I mean? I didn't go into the year thinking, all right, I'm going to do this billboard campaign and, I believe in traditional media and I love outdoor. It was more of just like, let's try something different. Like I knew that, of course, I was going to do a social media campaign around the fact that we had billboards up around town. So like it's sort of a social media campaign, being used, being supported by an outdoor campaign. So it's kind of an interesting dynamic. But I just thought the billboard thing was interesting because people don't expect that from a very young, tech savvy millennial Gen Z social media agency that's like on Instagram and TikTok and LinkedIn all the time. So I just thought it would be a good way to stand out and sort of just grab someone's attention that might be, a 55-year-old business owner that's been around for a couple decades and they know who we are, but they view us as like this digital, only see us on Instagram type of thing. So I was like,
Right.
let me just switch it up and get in their face while they're driving down the street and getting coffee. So
I love that. That's
part
great.
of it was just like, let me just switch it up and do something interesting. But the sort of the practical piece that goes along with that is it was just a really good deal. I mean, what it comes down to when I'm looking at media, it's not so much like I believe in Facebook ads or I believe in TikTok or I believe in LinkedIn DMing. Like, it's not so much that I believe in certain things just because of the fact that I've been trained that way or something. It's really just what are the amount of eyeballs that you're going to reach, and what's the impact it's going to have, and what does it cost. And
Sure.
this specific billboard campaign, I felt, which is rare for me when it comes to outdoor and traditional and print, I felt like it was a really good deal for the impressions that were projected for it.
Yeah.
And when I combined that with knowing that I was going to post it on social, and knowing that it would probably get pretty good engagement on social, knowing that I could run some ads on social with the billboard in the image, and just like, comparing that to the price that I was able to secure for the for the time period that I'm on those boards, I just felt like it was a good deal. So it's not like I believe in a certain medium or anything. It's really just whenever I'm weighing the cost of anything, like if a magazine came to me and said, "Hey, do you want to get a full page ad for $200?" and it had like a business audience, I'd be like, "Let's test
Sure.
it."
Yeah.
Sure.
How bad can it be? Yeah.
Yeah. But the problem is most traditional media, and again, I don't like to generalize anything because I know that there's always good ones, there's always bad ones. But most of the time, whenever I see, because I like to check in on rates for different media and things like that, just because I'm curious what's out there. The rates on print and a lot of those traditional forms of media, radio, a lot of the rates are the same as they were 10 years ago, if not more. And there's less eyeballs and attention on all of them right now. And the fact that they haven't adjusted most of the time makes me realize that digital is a better option for our clients and for us in most cases. But yeah, like I said, if you show me any sort of traditional media, if you show me a bench in the park that I think is a good deal, then I'm still going to consider it. And
Sure.
whether it's for us or whether it's for our clients, we just have to look out for the budgets that we have and maximizing the effectiveness of whatever we're putting out there. So if it's a good deal, then it's a good deal. I'm not married to any specific platform.
And it also shows your clients that you're keeping your finger on the pulse of what's going on, not only in
Mm-hmm.
terms of what's getting best reach and the best response rate, but also the prices. And if they see,
Yeah.
hey, well, Jake is going to put up a billboard, maybe I should at least ask him about it. And they know
Yeah.
that you're not going to just do again, you're not going to just follow status quo, which has been kind of a theme in our conversation today, right? You're going to take chances and think, let's try this out, right? And you look at possible scenarios. How bad can it be? Is the ROI going to be there? I don't want to bet the farm on doing a billboard campaign out of the blue, but
Mm-hmm.
as one channel, one avenue, let's give it a try and see what happens, and we can report back on that and really kind of repurpose that billboard campaign, with on Instagram, as you said, but also the research, whatever comes out of that campaign, you can, I would assume, use that with your clients. Say, hey, here's what we found. In some cases, A, B, and C scenario, it might make sense for you. Otherwise, don't even think about it. It's kind of too old school, or it's not going to be as effective. But that's great that
Right.
you're taking that chance yourselves to showcase that that you are willing to go against the status quo.
Yeah, I mean, and it's not even just it is going against the status quo, but it's not like I'm going against the status quo just for the sake of being innovative, or like just to go against the status quo just for the
Sure,
heck of it.
sure.
It's just genuine curiosity for, is this going to work, and will this have a positive impact? It was the same thing with the 4-day work week, same thing with the billboard. It's like, how am I going to know if buying a cheap billboard and then running a social campaign around that billboard is a good idea unless I do it? So, and it's the same thing with the 4-day work week. It's like, how do I know this is going to be a positive impact or a negative impact if I don't try it? So, yeah, I mean, it is interesting sometimes though when a client comes to us just thinking social tech, like digital. We have the social media side of our business, and that is 80% of it in terms of what people come to us for, and what people pay us for. But the other service that we offer is media buying. And I think people come to us just thinking, okay, they'll run some Facebook ads along with the Facebook posts. But, you know, I think people are surprised sometimes whenever they say, yeah, we have this media budget. And then I start recommending things that they're not expecting that I recommend. And they're like, oh, like, you think about that kind of stuff? And I'm like, well, it's a good deal. So like, why wouldn't we think about that?
Sure. Yeah. Why not at least consider it? Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
That's
But
perfect. So I have one more question I want to ask you, but before we get to that last, kind of final wrap up question, how do people
Mhm.
get a hold of you? Obviously, what you've talked about has been fantastic as a leader, as a manager of people, as running this firm. A lot of folks are probably going to have more questions for you. What's the best way for them to contact you?
Yeah, people can, where I'm the most active is my LinkedIn. So if anybody just searches for my name on LinkedIn and adds me on there, that's where you can get directly a hold of me the easiest, because that's the platform I spend the most time on. And even if you're just interested in hearing kind of more of my day-to-day thoughts on things, that's where I post the most content and thought leadership and industry things I'm noticing. And that's where I'm doing the most. And then if you're curious about our business, it's just brickmediagroup.com, brick like a brick wall, mediagroup.com. And we keep all of our company social medias up to date, as you can imagine. But yeah, I'd say LinkedIn for me directly. And then if you're just curious about the company, just like check out our website and all of our company social channels. We also
Very
have a
cool.
Brick Media podcast that's hosted by somebody on our team. One of our account managers hosts it, and she's always, interviewing different marketers about different trends in the industry. Like if you're interested in marketing specifically, and then I'm going to be soon having a podcast come out that's more leadership and things like we're talking about now. So, um, but yeah, if you stay tuned with my LinkedIn, then you'll hear about that when it comes.
Great. I know a lot of the folks I talk to also are looking for good, real world conversations and podcasts, not the fluff that you find with the celebrities, which is a nice kind of, that kind of departure from the usual stuff. But it's good to have those life lessons too. Okay, so the last question I want to ask you, and this again is back to leadership, and especially those leaders that are, in their 50s like me, or even in their 60s. There is a big question out there about whether or not it's okay for employees to have quote unquote a side hustle, right? We've had a lot of our clients that have said over the years, I want to hire somebody who's going to be here and be loyal and work only for me. And 10, 20, 30 years ago, okay, I get that. But today, that really shouldn't be a factor. And it's not going to, I mean, if you have a side hustle, in my opinion, doesn't mean that you're disloyal to your main employer. It just means you're also doing something else. But I'd love for you to share your perspective for the leaders, the CEOs, the heads of HR that are listening to this. What would your perspective be on employees that you want to hire that do also have a side hustle?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a simple thing whenever you were talking that just ran through my mind. It's like, what do business leaders and HR people think is going to happen in the world that we live in today? It's like people have the internet and they have social media and they have opportunities to just spin up a website and start a side thing. Or if they want to offer social media, all they have to do is walk into a restaurant and say like, hey, I'm a social media consultant. I can, I have an LLC. All you got to do is sign up for an LLC and you have a business. So I think in some ways it goes back to accountability, like we were talking about earlier. It's like, if you don't want people on your team to have a side hustle, then hire people that don't have side hustles. Like, it's like, it's pretty simple. It's like, the way that I view it is, people are going to do what they're going to do, and they're going to be interested in what they're going to be interested in. And for me, I would rather just allow people to be their full selves so that they're fulfilled, they're happy. And if that matches up with my business and my goals, then great. I can have them on the team and we can both be happy doing our things. But if it conflicts with the business, and maybe somebody on my team has a side hustle that's also social media and it's going after the same types of clients that we're going after, you just have to draw clear lines in the sand of like, you can do this, you can't do this. If you want to work here, these are the guidelines. Um, I know people have non-competes where you can't go after your direct clients at work and things like that. So there's all those like practical things. But as far as the mindset goes, I would just say, if that's a worry to you, then just look for the people that maybe don't have side hustles. Um, but in general, people are going to be themselves. And if they're not being themselves and scratching that itch of like having a side hustle or whatever it is that they want to do, it's going to come out at some point. It's like inevitable with people. Like, if you have something in you and you want to do it, whether it comes out in 3 months, a year, 5 years, it's gonna come out at some point, and you're gonna have to scratch that itch at some point. So I just think all leaders can do is take accountability and be like, well, if this works for me, then great, we can make it happen. If it doesn't work for me, then, maybe I won't interview or hire those people, but um, at least the people that are going to be on our team are being their full selves. There's nobody right now that's on the Brick Media team that has to hide anything that they're doing on the side and, feel weird that I'm going to be upset about it or anything. I probably, if I was going to have an issue with what somebody was doing on the side, they probably never would have been on the team in the first place, because I would rather just have people on the team that are, again, they're fulfilled and they're happy because they're doing what they want to do. And if that is working a job at Brick Media for 40 hours a week and then also shooting wedding videos on the side, why would I ever have a problem with that?
Sure.
You know?
Exactly. That's a great perspective.
So
And I again, back to the recurring theme of transparency and trusting your team and allowing them to not making it feel like they have to hide something from you. And they know that you prefer and you really want that transparency to let them know, hey, I'm doing this. Right. And it could even become part of an interview question, panel of questions that somebody asks while they're thinking about hiring somebody, asking a potential candidate, what do you think about side hustles? And just kind of hearing their
right.
philosophy on it. Not that it's a right or wrong or a judgment in that question. It's just, what do you think about it? I'm kind of curious, right?
Right.
To your point, people are going to do what they're going to do, right? And as long as the job is getting done, back to what you said earlier on, where it's about the results, not about the activity, right? And you're not micromanaging. As long as the work's getting done and the side hustle is not becoming, a deterrent to their business or it's competitive in nature, then let them do what they're going to do as long as it's a very clear message from the get-go.
Right.
Agree
And
with
for yeah, and whenever you were talking to the other word that popped into my mind was audacity. Like,
that.
I just feel like business owners and people that are leaders of companies sometimes, again, I don't like to generalize, but there are some people that they lead a company, but they have a lot of audacity that just because they own a business, other people need to like jump on the bandwagon and start working for them. And it's all about their business. It's like, just because I started Brick Media doesn't mean my employees owe me anything. Like, just because I
Sure.
have a business and came up with an idea and, I want to build the team doesn't necessarily mean that somebody has to not do what they want to do just because my business exists. So I think it's just keeping in mind that we're all people, and just because you own a business doesn't mean that you're above anybody else, or, you might be making more money than somebody, or maybe your status or your title is higher than somebody's. But at the end of the day, we're all people and we're all going to do what we want to do at the end. Like, it might take a little bit of time for certain people, but at the end of the day, people are going to do what they want to do. And, I just think that you just got to keep your business in perspective and not think that it makes you this, almighty person that everybody needs to follow. And your employees need to just like, only care about your logo and not care at all about what they want to do. And,
Yeah,
yeah,
you're
there's
not this
definitely some
infallible
audacity.
leader out there. There's the human side. There's a human side of your employees, but also the human side of you as the leader. I agree completely. Well, I think
Yeah.
that's a great way to wrap things up. Thank you again for being vulnerable, having this great conversation. There's a lot of amazing topics that we touched on, which each one could be a separate podcast by itself, honestly. But kudos to you and congrats again on your 5-year anniversary. I look forward to coming
Thank you.
back and talking again when you're at your 10-year anniversary. It'll be exciting to see what's happening at that point. But congrats and thanks again, Jake. It was a great conversation today.
Thanks so much, Ken. I appreciate the opportunity.